Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, a podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas and signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I'm really thrilled to have two great guests on. So we have Maisha Colter, who is the executive director, and Vanessa Ames, who is the board chair of an organization called AVDA, and they're based in Houston. They have an signature fundraising event coming up called the Home Safe Home Gala, which is a beautiful, wonderful evening. It's done, it's done very, very well, and it's been a joy to kind of watch this organization evolve over the years and really be able to connect very deeply within the Houston community. So we're going to have a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. So with that, Maisha, Vanessa, welcome, and I'm so thrilled both of you are here to join us today.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having us.
So Maisha, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about the mission of AVDA.
Sure. So AVDA is an organization whose goal is to end domestic violence by advocating for those who are survivors of domestic abuse while holding those who are perpetrators accountable and educating everybody about how domestic violence impacts all of us.
Absolutely. And it is something that, it extends to the homes, but it also extends to people within their universes. I don't even want to say networks because with children, it's more about a universe really of people that are in their lives. So I'm really glad that you all focus on that and also just, focusing on the perpetrators as well, just that allows those who are victims to maybe heal a little bit more quickly or a little bit more fully than they may be otherwise. And I just think that, it's a great mission that you all have. And I'm always fascinated with how people get involved with organizations. So I'd love to hear about each of your paths as to how you initially got involved with this organization. Maisha, I'd love to start with you. Tell us about your path to, becoming the CEO of AVDA.
Sure. So I am a social worker and an attorney by profession. And when I moved to Houston, I was looking for opportunities that would allow me to perhaps have a career where I could do both of those things in some way, shape, or form. And happened upon AVDA just by, it wasn't even Google, might have been Yahoo, but I did a search and I was basically putting in, you know, attorneys, social workers, different things like that, women, children, and that organization came up in my search. And I cold called the person who was at the time, they were called the executive director. We're now CEOs, but she answered the call. And I told her I wanted to volunteer. I gave her a little bit about myself. And she and I met for breakfast. And we had a conversation. And that conversation led to me, one, committing to volunteering. And then maybe a few days after that conversation, we had an additional conversation, and she asked me, would I be interested in becoming a staff attorney at the organization? I had a job. I was full time employed as a director of social services at an alternative school at that time. And I was just an 11-month employee. So I knew I had a whole month off. And that was why I wanted to volunteer. So I I was hesitant to say yes because I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. Like I said, I was going to volunteer and then got offered a job. Long story short, I took the job, took the risk, and ultimately became the staff attorney there. And the rest is sort of history.
Wow, I love that story. And I love that it just started with a cold call. And it just goes to show that, if you put yourself out there, opportunities can really come from that. And what also really impresses me is you had mentioned you moved to Houston from another market. And I think that's really interesting. What advice would you give to somebody who's moving to a new city in terms of getting involved with their community and finding something that really resonates with them?
Yeah, I think it's so important that when you make those moves where you want to be involved in the community, that you seek things out, that you try your best to identify things that are of interest to you. If you have a passion, then see what organizations align with those passions and get involved as quickly as you can. And then you might find, the first one on the first try, but ultimately you will get an opportunity to learn your community, learn what the community does to support, whatever it is that you're interested in. And I think it also gives you a chance to learn more about who you are in that city. Um, New York and Houston are very, very different, and that's where I came from. And I was so happy that I made the decision to move to Houston all those years ago.
That's, that's really fantastic. And I'm glad you brought the, you kind of won the lottery kind of the first time out with AVDA. So I'm glad you mentioned, if the first one's not necessarily the perfect fit for you, keep trying and you will find something that resonates and speaks with you. And that was a very cool path that you had to that. And I just love everything about it. And Vanessa, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you initially got involved with with AVDA.
Absolutely. Oddly enough, I moved to Houston in 2015 from New York, and I was new to the city and new to being married and having kids. And a few years down the line in 2019, I got to go to the AVDA Home Safe Home Gala at the Revere here in Houston. And it was really my first introductory to starting to go to charity events, learn about the community. And I really fell in love with AVDA's mission. My husband and I have a family manifesto, and really where we spend our time, our effort, our resources, and our money is with organizations that support the most vulnerable in our community. And AVDA fits that bill. So a very close friend of mine and fellow board member asked my husband and I if we would chair the 2020 Home Safe Home Gala. Well, we all know what happened in 2020.
We won't talk
So
about that, Vanessa.
we won't talk about that. But I find it an interesting parallel to the resilience of AVDA and their survivors to that period of time. We had to look at the event that used to be a big 400 plus chef tasting bites, wine, and how do we still create a great event, but change it to the period of time that we're in? Those funds were still critically needed, and we still needed to raise this event. Now, this was the first charity event I ever chaired, ever, and I have learned so much. And really, I think what we did in making it a virtual event, still having that connection with the chefs, the connection with the program being virtual, I really think it made me fall in love with AVDA. I thought the program was inspiring, everybody banding together to make sure the night was special. And since then, I have learned so much about AVDA's impact, really 360 on the whole family unit from survivors and also on the opposite side of that. And I've realized how vital it is for our community here in Houston. So I've been on the board for 2 years now, and I'm the current chair, and I could not be more impressed with everything that everybody does at AVDA. So that's how I got involved. So again, I really found my footing in the charity scene as soon as I could, and I felt comfortable with it.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought up, your path to the board and really, if you want to find an effective leader, anyone who managed anything during COVID successfully and didn't pull their hair out and still wanted to be involved, that's a really good surefire way to find, leaders. But I also know that you support and are on, boards of other organizations throughout Houston, such as like Crime Stoppers, for example. So talk a little bit about what makes you say yes to supporting an organization slash joining a board.
I touched on it a little bit, but I think as an individual and as a family, one thing that we did as a family is we sat down and really came up with that family manifesto and kind of decided, there are so many worthy charities, across the US and here in Houston. And as much as I would like to support them all, I feel like it's the ones that you're more passionate about. So if it's things that you go to the event and you go to the board meeting and you're not working or you don't feel like you're strained for time, then those are the right areas for you. If you are madly passionate about something, those are the areas because those people, organizations, and I know AVDA and Maisha can talk to this as well, as they want volunteers, they don't want hostages, right? So they want people that are going to come in, they want chairs, they want board members that are really going to help and dig in and utilize their expertise to help their organization. My background is creative and strategy. I worked in advertising for decades, and I really, anytime we are doing an event, whether it's with AVDA or another organization, what I'm bringing to the table is what I'm best at. And the best boards are the ones that are made up of all different people. And that's why I love the AVDA board, is because we have so many specialties. It is really a very diverse board that supports Maisha. So to me, the best thing you can do as an individual is really look in your heart what you're passionate about and go after those areas.
Very well said. And I'm glad you retouched on the manifesto piece and really deciding not just as an individual, but also the members of your own family, what you individually and what you collectively as a unit feel passionate about, and devoting your time and resources in that. And that's such really good and sound advice. And, Maisha, I want to direct this next question to you, as the CEO, and Vanessa kind of touched upon this a little bit, but talk a little bit about what is the one thing an organization can do, and I want to turn to the gala here, to host a gala that basically gets more successful year after year and that you continue to break fundraising records.
I think the most important thing is to build relationships, really to have those donors who are new to the organization learn and grow in the organization, find their space, because I think that will allow them to continue to reinvest in what we're doing. Obviously, besides growing those relationships, expanding them, finding new people. So we always encourage our board, our donors, to bring somebody else to the event. If you come for the third time, you must know someone who has never been. Bring that person to your table. Let them see what it is that we do, hear what we have done in the past year, see who we honor. All of those things start to make those connections. And once that happens, then I think it's pretty easy to continue to engage and to continue to have that dynamic. But yeah, I think it's ultimately about relationship building, either new relationships or elevating and cultivating the relationships that you do establish.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because any great event, they're going to have those core supporters, but I love how you talk about how you've got to blend and bring in new folks. And I especially love the idea if someone's been going to it for 2 or 3 years, asking that person, because that person's going to be flattered, that person's going to feel seen, that person's going to feel valued, and they're going to be much more likely to not just do it that year, that first time. They'll probably do it unprompted, or they'll be a lot more likely to do it unprompted, in future years. And Vanessa, I'd love to hear, your perception from a chair's perspective. Talk a little bit more about, maybe not necessarily about getting more successful, but create a devoted following so that those core supporters keep coming back year after year, kind of like how you fell in love with the organization through the gala, that keeps people coming back and again and again.
Absolutely. To me, there is one core thing. Like once you get people, you have butts in seats. That's the really hard part. Development works really hard on that. It's to me about the program that gets people to come back, right? And there's one guiding, overriding principle for me, and it's consistent, memorable storytelling. Storytelling is such an important part of any event, whether it's a luncheon, whether it's a gala, whether it's this podcast, right? So to me, it is combining that storytelling with genuine like entertainment. And people are like, oh, you mean like a band? No, entertainment does not always mean a band. It means like, what is the program? What is the arc of the storytelling? Because yes, donors want to feel connected to the survivor's journey, the impact, and they want to rally the community, but they're also taking time away from their family. So we want to make sure that they feel like that was time well spent. And every moment in that program counts. Once you start your program, you got to keep it consistent. You got to keep that story arc in the right way. And, every charity has a story, but it's how you package it, how you balance the heart and the fun to me, that's the difference between a one-off person coming and gets people coming back.
That was so well said. Everything you said was absolutely spot on and absolutely true. And I want to turn, and we'll start with Maisha with this question, and then I'm going to kind of evolve it with Vanessa. And successful events are a three-legged stool. So there is the board, there is the organization leadership, and then there is the event chair. And those three things really kind of need to be in sync. So you've got this sturdy, successful stool from which, the organization can thrive. And Maisha, I'd love to start with you. Talk about how critical a successful relationship is between the organization leadership with leaders such as yourself and the board in helping create a successful gala.
Yeah, it is. It's critical. It's a partnership that without it, you cannot be successful. One of the things that I will say is that we do have a very diverse board, and they have all kinds of talents, and they have different networks, which is a real value in and of itself, and that helps us to cultivate the event and all of the things that go along with it. But I think the critical thing is recognizing the different roles and responsibilities that each carry along the way and making sure that those are defined clearly, and then that everybody can carry off their responsibilities as we put on these events, year after year. I think when you have people who have clear, sort of transparent communication and clear expectations about what is going to happen, what is intended, I think things go off better, and I think you have the end product is always going to be better. So I think that's a critical thing for anybody who's engaged in fundraising and specifically event planning with that board and staff connection.
That's fantastic. And, clear communication and clear expectations it's so critical because you don't want too many chefs in the kitchen, so to speak, kind of to tie on the tasting that you all did, a few years back. That was a perfect metaphor for that. And Vanessa, I'm going to evolve this question a little bit. And, I want to, because you can speak to this uniquely, having been an event chair and now being on the board. Talk about what are the keys to have a successful relationship between an event chair and the nonprofit, whether it be the board and or the executive leadership of that organization.
The Maisha said it. The first word was from day one, clarity. The best relationships between a chair and a nonprofit, including like the leadership and the board, is really clarity of expectations of each of the members, the expectation of the chair, the expectation of the board, and the expectation from the organization. I think a lot of first-time chairs and people that aren't familiar with chairing things, they don't know the right questions to ask. They might love the organization, but what if you're not a natural party planner? You don't really like to ask people for things, because 90% of all what chairs do is you ask people for things. So if you're not comfortable with that, you should probably get a co-chair that is. So really understanding what I, as the chair, what am I going to have to do? What is the board going to contribute? And what is the nonprofit going to handle? What is the internal, right? And every charity is different. Some charities are bigger. Like you think of American Heart Association, they've got like an army of development people. Like organizations like AVDA, they have a few folks, and then there's other organizations that don't have anybody. So you need to understand like what your role is going to be, and then that will help dictate like whether it's the right role for you, or maybe you're going to be on the host committee and help out. So by getting that clarity of expectations, you'll go into it like with your eyes wide open, and also it helps the nonprofit and the board understand who and how they're going to help them. Like you don't want to get to the end of the gala and the person didn't really know what they were doing. So it is really, also another word comes to mind. There needs to be a lot of trust, and with to get trust, there has to be clarity.
Very, very well said. Trust and clarity are so key. And I'd love to follow up with one question, kind of dive a little bit more deeper. As the board chair, what are the secrets to successfully galvanizing your board? Because, a lot of nonprofits do struggle with that in that they've got a board and they can't necessarily get all of its muscle behind the gala, which is going to raise a substantial amount of funds and contribute substantially to the organization's budget. What advice would you give to somebody in terms of galvanizing your board, from a board chair perspective?
Well, I know Maisha's smiling because this one is my specialty. I would say that first, from a board chair perspective, is you have to be outspoken. If you don't speak up to your board and let them know, again, clarity, what their expectations are, what you want them to do, then you can't expect them to read your mind. So it's having those communications with the chairs, what they want and need, and taking that to the board and clearly saying, hey, these are the three things that you can do today to support the gala. So it's really being okay with like, in the board meetings, having the tough conversations, calling them directly and being like, hey, I know that you know X, Y, and Z. Can you call them for us? So it's all about, again, clear expectations of what you want from them. I try to make it fun. There's no mandates here. Again, no, it's volunteer work. So you can't be like, you have to do this. But there are expectations on almost every board that you're involved in some way. But for me, it's telling them and communicating what the actual chairs need from them, and most likely not, AVDA board is really great. Whether it's the luncheon or whether it's the gala, everybody always steps up. But my job as board chair is to make sure they understand what we need.
Well, what I appreciate about that answer is the example you gave about just making the ask. The ask isn't necessarily just a financial one. And the
Yep.
ask can be getting more volunteers. It can be getting an auction item. It's all the different types of capital that are responsible for an event, whether it's social capital, whether it's human capital, whether it's financial capital. And what I loved about your answer is it could apply to any one of those. And all three of those things are, really critical keys to a successful event. And Maisha, I'd love to direct the next question to you and, talk about how you as as the CEO use the gala to connect more deeply with existing donors, but also develop and establish connections with potential, first-time attendees to make them more substantial donors down the line.
Well, I think Vanessa hit this already in that we're trying to tell a story. We use the gala as an opportunity for us to tell the story of AVDA, whether that's through the voice and lens of our clients, and their stories, and we highlight things that have happened in the year. We try to connect the audience to the work and what we do and how it impacts, our clients, but then ultimately our community and how we need that partnership, how we need them to support us in order for us to be effective in doing the mission that we are sharing with them on that occasion. Because a part of every, nonprofit is we use these funds in reality to carry out the mission and letting people know what that mission is. This is an opportunity. Every time you have these events, this is an opportunity for you to tell what is your mission, how it's impacting people, and whether or not um, that support is needed and necessary to continue to carry out the obligations of the mission.
So well said. And I'd love to kind of follow up with that to a degree with Vanessa with a question. And that is last year's event. I know you all ended with a really powerful moment last year with your Be the Light moment that really effectively tied to the mission like Maisha was talking about. So tell us a little bit more about what the Be the Light moment was and how it really allowed the room to almost feel like a singular collective family while powerfully highlighting the mission at the same time.
Absolutely. We talked about that storytelling multiple times during this discussion, and really that Be the Light moment was the crescendo from that storytelling through the entire evening. We honored folks that really embodied that Be the Light, right? We wanted to showcase people that have stepped forward, that have created that aura and that positivity, and really uh put a light onto domestic violence. Every person we honored, it was really an eye-opening discussion. And at the end, the Be the Light movement is a call to action to everyone in that room to really see your neighbors, see the people at your table. There are so many people that you could be walking past in the grocery store that are victims of domestic violence, and it's really opening your eyes. And if you see something, say something. Be that light for somebody. So it is a call to action to recognize people, to be thoughtful. And when people need help, there are people out there like AVDA that can be there for them.
So well said. So well said. And another thing, and Vanessa and Maisha, you both mentioned this at certain times. I'd like to direct this next question to Maisha, and that is each of you all honor somebody. So I'd love for you to share how you all as an organization select an honoree, as well as teasing anything you may be able to share about this year's honoree.
Sure. So one of the things that we try to do, we usually honor two individuals. We have a Heart of Houston award, and then we have the Joe Jamel endowment that was put forth when Mr. Jamel was still alive in 2015. It's an opportunity for us to fundraise and collect dollars that specifically support what we call ALICE, asset limited income constrained employed individuals. So it's kind of your working force. They would not qualify for legal aid, which is one of our primary services. So we have to continue to put money in that pocket to be able to source attorneys who will help that particular population, because not all of our services um, are for people who are, below the poverty level. That's not the intention. That being said, with the honorees, we're usually identifying individuals who have a passion for this particular issue and have led in some way in the community, in their network, in their sometimes in their even in their work life. This year's honoree has two different segues into AVDA. One, her parents were longtime supporters. So much so, I tease her. I say, "You grew up AVDA," because, AVDA's turning 45 this year, and her mom was actually one of the people who was involved with the founding organization, NCJW. And so she has been around AVDA, from her early teens in some way, right? And then she is a doctor, and her education and her background allows her to interface with survivors in meaningful ways. She does education, she trains medical students. And so one of the things that she and I do together every year, we do two classes to new residents, and it's all about domestic violence and other social detriments within our community. And she's been doing this for years without any sort of recognition or acknowledgement. But that's the sort of person we want to highlight, because we do recognize that that level of dedication moves the needle, and it isn't always about just, how much do they give or what do they do in this way. It's what impact are they having on potentially decreasing the numbers of people who are vulnerable and who are experiencing domestic violence in their home, in their world, as you said earlier.
That's amazing. And I love that, you're honoring people for the merit of what they're doing and for the way that they propel the organization forward to impact as many people positively as possible. And I hope that more organizations start taking that track, because without the people doing the work, you all couldn't thrive as an organization. And, the volunteer network and, and board and all those other things that are tied to it are so critical and so, and so important. I'm so glad that, Maisha, you shared a little bit about this year's honoree. Vanessa, I'd love for you, if you can, and obviously I know you can't give away the farm here, but can you tease what guests may be able to experience at this year's Home Safe Home Gala?
I can't tell everything. You're gonna have to buy a table or a ticket and find out. But Maisha touched on it. It is AVDA's 45th anniversary, and that is a milestone. So we are going to be celebrating in style. And for the first time, we're going to be gathering at the brand new Thompson Hotel. I've been to the ballroom. It is absolutely beautiful. So expect a fresh, elevated atmosphere, paired with a few surprises and delights. But the biggest thing we're going to be doing is celebrating that 45th year. And through these honorees and through the 45 years in that timeline, tell the story of what AVDA has done and also what the future chapter brings for them. So I'm excited to, again, going back to that storytelling, share this great story of AVDA, but also what the trajectory for AVDA is going forward.
That's fantastic. And, congrats on 45 years. I mean, that's a remarkable feat and very few nonprofits get to it. So that's awesome. And that you're celebrating it in a new space, in the Thompson. I know it will be a really special and it will be a really fun evening. And I know we're coming up on time here. And I always like to end with this question. So Maisha, I'd like for you to go first, and then Vanessa, you can have the last word. And that is, what do all successful fundraising events have in common?
I think there's passion behind them all. Passion from those who commit to doing the work, passion from those who come alongside as volunteers, either as the chairs or as the board members. There's passion behind everything that goes on. And there is, you know, a hope that we'll continue to evolve and do the work in a successful way.
Passion is absolutely key. And that is something I can tell you when I walk into a room, I can always tell how successful an event's going to be in part by the level of passion by the people in the room. And you can really see that. And that's one of those things you can't necessarily teach. It's one of
Mhm.
those intangibles that has to come into the room. And when it's there, man, is it really special. And Vanessa, I'd love for your thoughts on that question.
I 100% agree with Maisha. I'll add this. I think I call it spicy passion, but spicy to me is what makes an event tick. And it really to me stands for seamless logistics, right? Every detail from the moment a guest walks in to seating to queues. The second one is purpose driven. Every element, the venue, the decor, the program, the script, the why is clear. The next is we talked, I feel like this is the theme, compelling storytelling. And then the last two is to me is inclusivity and guest-centered experience. You don't want anybody in the room to feel like they're left out. And then lastly, once the event is over, it is not over. You need to make sure you have year-round engagement. If you don't stop talking to the people that came to the event, like they've got a whole life. And if you want to get them involved, you have to engage them past the gala. So to me, it really is that passionate spice that makes events really sing and really can build year over year.
That was absolutely fantastic. And I'm so glad, Vanessa, that you ended on it doesn't stop the night when the lights go out at the end of the night. It is a year-round process, and you can see very clearly why, AVDA has been so successful for 45 years and why the Home Safe Home Gala is one of the more successful galas in Houston. And I cannot thank you both enough for the time today. This has been an absolute pleasure. So thank you, Maisha and Vanessa, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Absolutely. And the Home Safe Home Gala, benefiting AVDA, also known as AVDA, will be held on October 15th, 2025, at the Thompson Hotel in Houston, Texas. For more information, please visit avda.org. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.